Everybody, welcome back with the Purplatypus is the name, and today I'm going to be showing you the 10 units I think you should be using in Tower. Now, this will probably change as we get closer to level cap and we get really strong stuff, but right now, if you're trying to clear Tower, these are going to be units that you're going to want to be investing in, and when I say investing, I don't mean getting a max gear. That's not how the strategy works. We want units for their abilities, and we're starting down here in the common for very specific reasons. There are many good common heroes, especially for high level tower. So I say there's 10, there's roughly 10, a couple, I think it's closer to like 11 or 12, but a couple of them fill the same spot. So 10 sounded better for the thumbnail. So that's what we're going to do. So number one here, Outlaw Assassin. Now, Outlaw Assassin is going to be the first in a series of units that are picked for a very obvious reason, and only one obvious reason here. So Luxite Shrapnel. That's it. This is probably the most unimportant of the units, which is why we're starting down here. Luxite Shrapnel is an incredibly good ability. There are going to be other characters that have it, and sometimes you really need the movement speed of a Seeker. But for the most part, this is going to be an ability. This is going to be one that you don't bring, so they're a lower priority. However, Luxite Shrapnel is incredibly good. They do get the ability to teleport behind characters and then move and run away. They do get the ability to jump, so their mobility is going to be very good, and Luxite Shrapnel is an all-star ability. This ability is so fucking good in Tower. Absolutely, especially against these level fucking like 70 enemies, right? You're not doing shit for damage with normal techniques. So, there we go. Outlaw Assassin. More importantly is Recruited Assassin, in my opinion. Now, Recruited Assassin is either the best character on the team or absolutely useless, depending on the map. So, Hook is really nice. This is more a side effect, like sometimes it's nice to have, but maneuver and fancy footwork are really, really good. Maneuver is pretty good after you would attack. There was the week with Pandemic where you could attack someone, you inflict stacks of infect, and then you could run away. Maneuver was better that week, but fancy footwork, 50% less AoE damage, that's relevant, but this actually feels like a D&D thing, because I think rogues get 50% like less AoE damage, or they get advantage on it, whatever. You gain 2 stacks of dodge. This basically makes this an unkillable tank. Enemies will just waste their turns trying to attack. Now, sometimes you're gonna fight enemies that attack 3 times in a turn, or you can't tank multiple. Like one enemy will attack twice, another enemy will come in. You know, a bunch of archers. So there will be maps or situations where this is terrible, but there will be other times where you're literally unkillable. This will just absolutely fuck up the enemy. You absolutely want to keep Recruited Assassin in mind when you are thinking about basically these maps, because fancy footwork can absolutely carry you. Now, Outlaw Archer is probably the best of the common units, in my opinion. You could make a case here for Outlaw Crossbowman because of the ability to do infection on stacks and the ability to do really high piercing damage and lower the defense isn't that good here, but the high piercing damage and the infection on stacks is good. But I actually think that he's not quite as good just because he doesn't have the Luxite Shrapnel. And this unit has 3 insanely good abilities for the tower. They've got the Luxite Shrapnel, which is incredibly good. They have got the foot sniping. Lowering movement by 2 is a huge thing, because a lot of enemies in the tower aren't necessarily complex enemies. They just have high stats. So if you could take an enemy with a movement of 3, make it a movement of 1, and they can only attack at a range of 1, like you could just kite them forever and never need to worry about it. So foot sniping is a really, really good ability. A range 4 makes it super easy to use as well. Luxite Shrapnel, you're going to see it a few more times on the list, is super powerful. And even Beast Trap is really, really good. You could run up and you could put this down and then you could run away, and this interrupts their turn. This is 10% max HP, which is already good, but most importantly, it interrupts their turn. So this like stuns a character. Basically, they go up and they're gonna attack you, they land on this and they just have to fucking stop. Fucking super powerful ability. And the fact that you can move 2 tiles, you can move again by 2 tiles and inherit the remaining movement, so you can move quite a bit after doing this too, which is pretty good. I don't use Bear Trap the most, but it is an ability that every time I have it, I'm happy I have it. It's so good. Now, coming up to the silver units, there's actually less here in my opinion overall, but there are some good units here for sure. I'm going to give a special shout out to K.A. Guard here. Primarily, he has a lot of stuff in his kit. I think you could say Forced March is good, being able to basically pop alert characters or to trigger reactions without dying, because he gets 100% physical damage immunity for 1 turn. But I really think it's for resolve. This makes it so he can't die in 1 shot. Now, this is basically going to come into play when Outlaw Assassin or Recruited Assassin's dodge doesn't work. There are some maps where you just can't dodge, or enemies have abilities that you can't dodge specific abilities. or maybe it's a magic ability. I don't know. Like, there's certain times that dodge isn't going to be effective, and this will allow you to always take one hit without dying, which is sometimes all you need in tower, because maybe he dies on the second hit, but you're allowed to lose one character. You're not allowed to lose two characters. So just being able to always guarantee survive a hit, no matter what it is, who it's from, is really good. You can even do the passive guard here, so you can make them jump in front of someone. I don't usually use that. As you can see, I don't even have it because I typically position them in a way where I want them to stay. But still, absolutely, Resolve is more of a, this is more of a, not quite an honorable mention. He's really, really good on very few maps, though. Way less than normal maps, but absolutely good. So these are the last three right here. I'm going to include PayPal Ice Priest and Darklight Ice Priest in the same category, even though they're quite a bit different. PayPal Ice Priest is much better on average. On average. Not always, but 80+% of the time. PayPal Ice Priest has the Ice Cone, which is incredibly good. The other guy has it as well. But PayPal Ice Priest has two things over the other unit that is way, way better. They have the AoE pushback. So on Isles with pushback, this becomes one of the best ability where you can knock things off of cliffs. This is like the best push in the entire game. Also lowers speed, also lowers movement. Even if you can't kill them, it still has relevant applications. Being able to put down a bunch of ice tiles is broken. It absolutely fucks up the enemy that are trying to chase you down. Suddenly they can't fucking move towards you. Ice Age is a similar ability. It's pretty good. But really what they have over the other Ice Priest, because the other Ice Priest has Ice Cone, is that you have 270 speed. So you outspeed literally everything in the game. Being able to go first is so important because sometimes you'll fight a bunch of strong enemies and they can just one-shot your team, you know? And so in order to go first and give yourself urgent order, give yourself the ability to summon a barrel or use any kind of like tactics on the first turn, while also being able to slow down the enemy with a either pushing them to make it so they're actually slower or making it so they can't reach you, is so important. Absolutely an all-star unit. Now, every now and then you are going to want Darklight Priest because maybe the speed doesn't matter that much, and he does get energy restoration. So where the other unit can't use Ice Cone every single turn always, this character can always use Ice Cone without fail. And once in a blue moon, you might want to use Flash Freezing because it is a really good ability. Single target, move down 3. So the character is going to have 3 less movement. This will make some characters unable to move, and other characters that can move will, that have like 5 movement, will still get pushed down to like 2 movement. And if you have them surrounded by ice and they're not like immune to ice tiles, then suddenly they're only going to be able to move 1 square. So this is an absolute insane ability. But on most maps, you don't need it. But there are some boss maps where the speed is maybe not the most important thing, where this could be a character you want to bring in every once in a while. And then finally, we got Vadan Scout here. Vadan Scout is basically the Outlaw Assassin, but on steroids, way better. But it's almost for the exact same thing. It's just the Luxite Shrapnel, really. But what they do have is they have a jump and climb, which is already really, really good. And they have extra movement when they're unharmed. And they have maneuver, so they get to attack and then move up and move away. So this character is just always where you need them to be. They never have a trouble. Like, you could be hard on like Outlaw Archer to get the perfect Luxite Shrapnel grenade because you have to move into a really dangerous spot and he doesn't have any way to escape. So that could be rough. This character can always get into like the perfect spot. Like, I want the grenade right here. They could run up, they could do it, they could run away, come back in a couple turns, do it again. Uncatchable. No enemy catches this unit. This unit is so freaking fast from a movement standpoint. Extra movement, so they have a passive 6 movement, and then they could do another thing that gives them even more movement. I think they even have it in here if I decided to get it right. It's like, okay, maybe this one doesn't have it, but it's like you have like a forced march, right? This unit just never gets caught. Super, super all-star unit. I do wish they had another attack. That if they had an attack that could cause infect, this would be top 3 units in the game for tower, in my opinion, but they're still up there. When we get to gold, most of the gold units I think are not particularly great. I do think you might want to bring like an infection attacker, someone that could do infection. That's like fine. It's not bad. It's good, but it's still not exactly what I'm looking for. A lot of the Luxite stuff is going to do more than just infection by itself. Even if you have like but you know, once you start getting to like legendary weapons and stuff, then I feel like we're kind of out of the realm of like trying to cheese the tower, which is mostly what I'm good at. I'm going to come all the way up here, and there's basically 2 here that I think are actually super worth it. I'm going to give a quick honorable mention to Suppression. This one isn't, I don't think he's super great, but he does have that resolve. So instead of KA Knight, you could use him instead. But the thing is, the rest of his kit is pretty much unusable. It doesn't really do anything. But he does survive a hit, and maybe if you're going up against magic, he can actually survive without dying, which is very good. But Nightingale, I think this is probably arguably the best tower unit in the game. Absolutely insane. Between like having, if you have like KA Knight or Suppression and they survive at 5% HP because of their Endure or Resolve or whatever, this automatically turns on, means boom, she's going to instantly get a turn. She's going to have extra movement. All of her cooldowns are going to get decreased. Tranquilizer is so useful for cheesing maps. Like, it just turns off a guy for 2 turns or a turn if they already have a bunch of dots on them, which is totally fine because they're going to stand there and take their dots and probably die. Weapon Eroder is like a really good version of, it's pretty much the exact same version as the Armor Eroder down at the bottom, but the armor erosion doesn't really matter because you don't care about lowering their defense for the most part. Being able to lower their attack is actually pretty decent because sometimes as their levels are getting higher, this will actually allow you to survive an attack that would have killed you otherwise. And it does a fuck ton of damage. The fact that sleep is instant, and then you could use armor, weapon eroder, or burning grenade. Burning grenade is probably the best ability for tower in the game. It's like a better version of the Luxite grenades. This does it does 10% damage, just like the Luxite, but it turns all the tiles into burning, meaning they are going to get a Scorch debuff, which will deal 10% of their damage at the end of their turn. But at every tile they move through, it will reapply Scorch, and you can't stack Scorch. So the Scorch pops off, dealing the 10% immediately, and then reapplies. So if they start in this back tile here, they're Scorched, right? You hit them with 10%, and then they're Scorched. So then they take, boom, 20%, boom, 30%. These also take more to move through. So this actually takes 3 movement to move these 2 tiles. So they took 10, 20, 30, and then they take 40% damage just by standing there. And that's only with this one ability. That's assuming you have no other effects on them. And if you run away, they're still Scorched. So next turn, they're still going to go down to 50%. So super powerful ability. Absolutely all-star. These are the 3 you want. She has other abilities, but if you're looking at tower, I think these are the ones that you want. Maybe you want 50% less damage over time. I don't know. I like Protection of Light myself. Other abilities are cool, but Burning Grenade is so fucking good. Tranquilizer is so fucking good. Weapon Eroder is really, really good. Sometimes you just need that 30% to finish off a guy. And I'm like, all right, is there anything I can do to kill this guy? Because 10%'s not doing it. Boom, Weapon Eroder. That'll just get the kill a lot of times. Also, remember, these are all on 3-turn cooldowns, but because if you have someone dying, these are actually going to be 1-turn cooldowns effectively. But you don't even need someone to die, right? You could just like kind of alternate through these abilities pretty safely without worrying about it. So, final character I'm going to talk about, because once you get up to Legends, know what? You're right. We got one more in Legend at least. Flame Sorceress here. So Flame Sorceress is a lot like, they're different than Nightingale, but they have the same kind of damage output style. So this character is usually not insanely good, but sometimes, like in this last map that was 10-5, if there are a lot of grass tiles that you could set on fire with an AoE fire attack, it basically becomes just as powerful as the fire grenade itself. But it doesn't work on like dirt, right? You need to be on specific tiles that you can catch on fire for this to be good. But if you have that, Fire Pillar becomes basically a fire grenade. And she does have the Flame Sorceress being able to scorch enemies at the end of the turn. And even in her skill tree, she has another one. So if they're standing on a grass tile, right, and they're here, this is a grass tile, these are all grass tiles. You light them up here, they instantly get scorched. And then if you're here and they're injured, I guess maybe you're here, you know, you're 1 tile closer. If they become injured, they'll take the 70% from that, right? And then they're scorched. And then you'll apply 2 more stacks of scorch. So that'll be 10, 20% damage. And then they'll move here 30, 40% damage. And then they'll still be scorched. And it's like, you could do this like in an AoE, because this is applying scorch to a lot of characters. This can apply scorch to a lot of characters. This can just guarantee reapply scorch to a single character. Honestly, just a really powerful character for percent-based damage consistently. But I do think she's a little more niche than some of the other characters. Luxite is a little bit safer, but if you're in the right map where the environment can be burnt, Fire Pillar becomes really good. But you also need something to keep her safe, because this only works from 4 tiles, or this only works from 3 tiles. So if you don't have their movement controlled, they're just going to come up and attack her. But if you do, absolutely a sick way to get a ton of damage output. Now, the final 2 are pretty much the same here, right? I'm only talking about the free-to-play ones. Fikal, I'm sure, is fine, but he's not really for the tower. Rabia and Mtha are both pretty much the same. I personally like Rabia more, but they both have their strengths. They are basically knock shit off of shit, you know, knock shit off of the map. They each have an advantage and disadvantage. Mtha has an advantage where there are some maps where there's a mutation where you take 90% less damage when you guard, and suddenly her ability to passively guard for an ally basically gives her ability to take a free hit, making her better, while also having 2 different knockdown abilities that go. This is a charge for 3 that also knocks back 2 tiles, but it's not actually that unique. Leg Slam knocks back 2 tiles and does movement, so it still has some versatility. But if you have the mutation that allows you to to guard and take 90% less damage, she basically becomes unkillable on that map, which is incredibly strong. Rabia has a different advantage where she can knock back as part of a strike back if she lives through the attack, of course, but she gets passive damage negation. But her normal attack is just a knockback 2 tiles, right? Her normal auto attack will knock things back 2 tiles. You have the Gale Breach, so you can actually dash 3 tiles and then use the Gash to basically do what the other combo was. As far as the actual damage output, you're not too concerned. Realistically, you're bringing these characters when you're on a map where things could be knocked into water or off edges. And in that case, if things are like you really want to knock stuff off, you're probably bringing them both. They're both going to fill almost the exact same role with only minor differences, where Rabia could do it like 3 turns in a row, 4 turns in a row without slowing down. Mtha can guard allies on specific maps. So that's what we're talking about today. I guess we'll give a final shout out to Beryl. Beryl has the Firewall, making her pretty much the best unit in the game for tower. If you have if you're doing tower and you have Beryl, you should have Wall of Flame and just use that because it does percent-based damage and does heavy damage. It makes enemies slower. It's just a fucking insane ability for that map as well. But yeah, those are the characters that I don't know how many I talked over. I said 10. I don't even remember at this point now. But those are the characters I'm going to recommend that you level up and use in tower. I will go have a guide that goes over like general tower strategy shortly. But yeah, for now, that's going to be it, guys. Anyway, thank you very much. Purplatypus is Purplatypus. I'll see you on the flip-flops. Bye! Platypus on the rise, watch the view.